So welcome everybody to Kremlin File. We're very happy that you've tuned in. Olga, we know that in the past few weeks, we've been going through a very, very tense, period with the Russian buildup of military armaments and personnel on the borders with Ukraine, also with the migrant situation of what was happening in Belarus. Okay, so today we have two very special guests. The former president of Estonia, Toomas Hendrik Ilves, and with Nicolas Tenzer. And Nicolas had held senior positions in the French government, I believe under Macron. He is also the publisher of Descruci, which we've talked about.
So we taped this episode with him in August when Lukashenko had just begun weaponizing migrants and, pushing them onto, at that time, it was Lithuania's border. And Europe at the time was on vacation. Not much was done. It wasn't a strong enough response. And now fast forward to November, we are literally on the verge of a possible war in that region. Because at this point, you have Lukashenko, who escalated his trafficking and weaponization of migrants to now push over the Polish border. And then you have at the same time the buildup of troops and military equipment on Ukraine's border. And what's even more dangerous, before where they were building up only on eastern Ukraine, now they're building up via Belarus on western Ukraine. So you have Ukraine being surrounded. You have Russia's rhetoric that is absolutely unhinged. The propaganda coming out of the Kremlin is, unbelievable. If you pick up any mainstream Russian media outlet, they are preparing the Russians for war and saying basically that NATO is preparing to launch everything from regular attack to a nuclear attack on Russia. And you have NATO who, is trying to figure out in the middle of meets to figure out what to do now if Russia decides to conduct a full invasion and how far Russia will go, where they will stop. So I think it's just very important because even though the episode was taped, we had touched on these topics and the dangers in August. And here we are now.
Yeah. Yep.
Anyone paying attention to the region saw all of this escalating in the spring, and this is just the price of what happens when there's a weak response and an appeasement policy.
That's right. So I guess without any further ado, let's welcome Nicolas and Toomas, to the pod. We're going to start off our discussion today with the international order and the values that underpin that order since 1945. And we've seen that order being turned on its head, especially in the last few years. We've seen the invasion of Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine, and how Russia has also tried to subvert the definition of democracy. Nicola, what are those values that underpin the international system?
I think that's basically all the values that were created, especially after World War II, were based on the idea of international law. It means very concretely that no country could revise the borders by force. All the countries recognize the international law principles are there. Let's say, for instance, we cannot commit war crimes, crimes against humanity, crimes of genocide. Even the former Soviet Union, it was purely theoretical, abide by those values. They recognize they are violating them, but on the other hand, they are recognizing those values. What's the main change after Putin came to power is that basically Putin's Russia and also Xi Jinping China are saying we don't care about those values. We can commit war crimes openly. And I always remind of the fact that in Syria, Russia has killed more Syrian civilians than either ISIS did. And then there were also the war crimes committed in Georgia, obviously in Ukraine, and in Syria. And the fact, the Western powers gave a kind of blank check or free hand to Putin to do that. And then when it comes to China's, we have exactly the same with the crimes against humanity or the crimes of genocide in Xinjiang against the Uyghur people. It could not have been imaginable, for instance, that a Western leader, either President Biden or Macron or Boris Johnson or whoever, would have shaken hands with, let's say, Bin Laden or Abu al-Bakr al-Baghdadi, the late the head of ISIS. But they are shaking hands, smiling with Mr. Putin or Mr. Xi Jinping. So it means that has a very concrete, consequence in the mindset of the people in Western democracies.
Yes. And not only, chemical weapons that are being used to kill people in Syria. And there are laws against using chemical weapons against mass population.
And the fact is that there was something completely mad, I think, in all the stances within the international organization and especially the UN Security Council. People were saying, well, we have, for instance, to pressure Russia to say to Mr. Assad that he have just to abandon this massive killing. But in fact, Russia is doing the same.
Russia is the one helping.
Not only, an accomplice, but a perpetrator.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's changed a lot. That changed a lot to have permanent member of the UNSC committing war crimes by themselves just to destroy the international order.
Toomas, do you agree with Nicolas in this, that he is out to destroy the international order? Do you have another idea?
No, it's absolutely the case, since, as Nicolas said, the international order was not only sort of first founded in 1945 in San Francisco with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but then followed up later with the Geneva Convention of 49, the principle of inviolability of borders, and the borders cannot be changed by force, was reiterated numerous times, and including the Helsinki Convention and the Paris Charter of 1990. So this is, it was established order. It was simply reiterated many times in various conventions to which Russia has been a party. And here we can kind of make a distinction between, China is not a part of the Paris Charter, not part of the CSC Helsinki Convention, but nonetheless, but the most, since wars start when you invade countries, so, I would say that that part is what has been completely ignored, in that the West is not reacting to it in the ways that it should.
They're not.
And I guess most recently and most egregious has been the reaction of France, Germany, and the silence of the United States on basically the invasion of Ukraine, the annexation of Crimea, and also the participation of the Russian troops in the Donbass, where, basically what you have is Russia is party to a discussion on Ukraine's future, in which which is utterly ridiculous, since they're the
aggressors. Exactly.
And the fact that there could be a deal that would sacrifice the territorial integrity of Ukraine, which is basically what is the Minsk agreements are all about, is something which is completely mad. And in fact, all the people say, okay, we have to find a kind of, as Biden said, a kind of strategic stability with Russia. But what does it mean, strategic stability? It means that we accept that basically we accept the fait accompli. We accept the fait accompli.
Yeah.
The real problem is how to reverse the tide. Who to say, well, we have, for the moment, I think that Putin has been the agenda setter.
That I agree with you. And that is one of the main problems because Russia invades a country. And instead of the international community saying you invaded the country, then suddenly these peace talks begin. What peace talks? Just tell Russia to get their troops out of the country. Yeah. I mean, they shouldn't be sitting at a table now. Okay. And this is how Russia dictates the narrative. And this is how they continue winning. Because when they invaded Georgia, I mean, the international community should have said, there is nothing to discuss here. Pack up your troops and leave. Same with Syria, same with Moldova, with Ukraine. And I mean, why is Ukraine sitting at a table trying to come to an agreement after they're being invaded? It's like if someone invades my house and then sits and wants to discuss how, what agreements there are about
just
living
over
here.
Your garage. Let's sit down and have
I'll take this
talk.
room on this hours. No, I mean, that's not how it works. So I agree with both.
There's a problem with media here as well. I mean, first of all, I mean, the narrative that Western media has used regarding Ukraine has been, first of all, well, on the one hand, the Russians say that the Ukrainians crucified a 3-year-old boy. This is BBC, right? On the other hand, the Ukrainians deny it. I mean, there is this both sides when, in fact, you're actually pitting absolute lies against the truth. And I mean, there is no middle ground between the truth and a lie. It really isn't. And so this has been very, very well exploited over the years. I mean, I would say for much longer than the past 7. And it's still bought. This is, I mean, you look at to this day, we have, first of all, a civil war when it's not a civil war. We have separatists when they are Russian troops. And this is the language that is used by the European Union and the European External Action Service. This is the implicit view of the High Representative for Foreign Security Policy, Josep Borrell. Now, we're not going to get very far if you already have those fundamental assumptions that I just mentioned, that it's really both sides and so forth, and ignoring the fact of an invasion and an annexation. Really, the first time we've had that in Europe since Georgia, but Georgia was really the first time since the Sudetenland in 1938. Yeah.
Toomas, we've already discussed the tools Russia has used in its hybrid warfare and how they've used their neighbors basically as a testing ground. You were president when Russia attacked Estonia in 2007, and it was the first time in recent history that a cyber attack against a NATO country was used.
It was the first time that a cyber attack was used, period. In fact, it is any history of cyber conflict and war begins with Estonia. Yes. Because until that point, it was not cyber. I mean, there had been hacks for a long time. And the most famous was Moonlit Mile from 1999 by Russia against the US State Department and Defense Department. Up to that point, it was always espionage. With 2007, in which we saw this full-blown attack on a country. It's the first time anything related to cyber fit von Clausewitz's definition of continuation of policy by other means.
By other means.
And in fact, basically, what happened was, at least for a brief time, the country was shut down. And the first solution to get out of it was to simply cut ourselves off from every country abroad because of the nature of the attacks, which were DDoS or distributed denial of service attacks, which come from all over because they're using botnets that can be from infected computers. Now, that I would say just one moment about that was that actually aside from the U.S., NSA and GCHQ in the U.K., no one really believed us because they had no clue about what was going on. And people said, "Oh, you Russophobic East Europeans, you're making up." And it was pretty odd because there I was saying, "No, this is not made up." And
we're seeing it, we're experiencing,
we're living it. Exactly.
So, since then, of course, people have kind of woken up to these possible, all these various forms of aggression using digital means, and I would hope that they would wake up a little more, since this is a new mode of warfare. And it is, it is non-kinetic warfare, and people have to move beyond the understanding that that warfare is simply sort of kinetic force equals mass times acceleration, which is Newton's second law. And in fact, you can attack countries, disable countries, take them out of commission using digital means. But we were the first to experience this. Now people at least believe in it.
Yeah.
Why do you think it took so long for NATO and EU and US to learn from countries who were going through this?
Well, as I said, before Estonia in 2007, they hadn't employed this. Later on, they continued with all over the place, but we were the first ones to get an attack like this. And I should also add that actually, as I mentioned, the United States got it. I was called almost immediately by Condi Rice, and the next day by President Bush. So the U.S. got it, and the U.K. kind of got it. But for example, Germany just didn't believe that it was really happening, because we were highly digital. A highly digital country already then. We had been applying or trying to convince NATO to set up a center of excellence for cybersecurity, and because they had 81 centers of excellence, including such arcane topics as in Kiel, they had a center of excellence for operations in closed and shallow waters. Talk about specific. And they had been putting off this the idea of a cyber center, saying, no, it's not really something we need. And then after the attack, it changed a lot of minds, because they saw how much damage you could do digitally. And so in that sense, we have the NATO Center of Excellence for Cybersecurity in Tallinn. And just today, because it's open to partner countries, and we have partner countries including Finland, Sweden, and Japan even, and Austria, they're sort of neutrals, and Japan. But today, Ukraine handed in its application to join.
Ukraine, there's an idea that, bringing Ukraine into into NATO or into the EU will also, help with its own security, right? As also, let's say, to bolster against Russia. Is this something that is augural?
It is. It's
necessary.
True,
yes,
but on the other hand, Estonia already then was not only the least corrupt country of all former commie countries, but it was also less corrupt than a majority of the EU already. It's just like number 17 in the world. The United States, I think, is number 25. So. But when it comes to Ukraine, it's done better, because it used to be 154, and I think now it's gotten to like in the 130s.
Has ways to go.
Without getting the corruption cleaned up, especially after the experiences that the EU has had with Bulgaria, Romania, and now Hungary. You really have to jump a lot of hoops in order to break through the opposition to it. And let's face it, Ukraine has a lot of work to do.
Yeah, and Ukraine is under, daily assault by Russia on every single, it's like a multifaceted assault. Nicola, so we've seen large-scale cyber attacks. We've seen the GRU poisoning of Litvinenko and Skripal on foreign soil. We've seen bombings in Czech Republic by Russian intel agents. We've seen assassination and terrorist squads operating across Europe. Why is Europe not acting in the face of all this Russian aggression on their soil, despite it killing their own citizens in some cases?
You have, I think, this real problem of understanding of Putin's regime. And there is still also then the idea that we can negotiate with Putin, that we can deal with Putin, that there is some advantages in keeping, let's say, not that bad relation with Putin, let's say on the fight against terrorism, so police cooperation, and this kind of thing, which is a complete blunder.
That is madness.
Blunder, yeah. I think, and if you have not a common understanding of what the next step of action should be, then nothing will happen. And then there is also the narrative that you were talking about Ukraine, which is, well, we should not provoke Russia. What's that stuff? I think the fact is that, in fact, from now since 21 years, Russia is provoking us. That's why, as I previously said, that's why Russia has won. And in fact, the idea is that if we are going a step further in, let's say, sanctioning, for instance, the oligarchs or the inner circle of Mr. Putin, etc., it will be provocation. That's something which is completely wrong, because, in fact, we never tried. We even never tried.
Yeah.
There's one more element here, and that is basically what happens is that you have anyone who can sell stuff to Russia. And we're talking about big business. They won't do it. But the point is that we have a very strong economic lobbies promoting this. And if you actually look at the political landscape in Germany, the only party that is seriously challenging this idea that we must actually help Ukraine to stand up for human rights are the Greens. Yeah. Because CDU is very pro-Russia, the Versteher. We have, you have SPD, the Socialist Party, which is, has, Gerhard Schröder, who is making oodles of money.
Yeah,
and the liberals kind of go this way and that. And then you have, of course, the extreme right, which loves Putin, and the extreme left, which loves Putin. Yeah. So, in fact, this is a serious domestic policy issue in which it's very hard to get leadership. And I'm also, Italy has the same issue. Berlusconi in his time, was best buds with Putin, and even after he left office, we flew to Petersburg for Putin's birthday. You have, in France, what I'm amazed at is that given that the Russians hacked Macron's server in 2017, that the reaction has been so mild. And of course, they've bought the Conservative Party lock, stock, and barrel in the UK.
They just bought the former Prime Minister, Fillon.
Fillon. Yeah.
So, we have this problem of corruption, and there are too many people making too much money from Russia. And so this means that it's hard to get Europe to move. In the case of the United States, this may be a little more complex, but even there are pretty strong economic ties with Deripaska, building an aluminum plant in Kentucky, the home state of Mitch McConnell. So, basically, it's the tentacles of kleptocracy reach far and deep into the West, both the United States and Europe.
That's right. How
I
about in the
absolutely second
Baltics?
that. I absolutely second that. And I think one of the main things that we have to do, that's why I was proposing to my government and to others, and I wrote a piece about that, about the links between corruptions and foreign influence. And I think that it's very important to expose the links between the people and to have a law in the EU countries and the US as well, of course,
Absolutely.
that makes impossible for a former government official or member of cabinet, let's say prime minister, MP,
Intelligence
advisor,
agencies.
intelligence people, etc., to make lobby or consultants for Russian people or Russian companies, or also Chinese company as well. And then we have to expose the things. We probably
name and shame them.
Yes, we suspect also that some think tanks, also some journalists, very prominent journalists, not only from, Russian outlets, also from mainstream journals, may have received, let's say, compensations or gifts from those regimes. And I think it must be public. It must be at least public. And the problem is, even if we come back to Mr. Fillon's case, that's basically in France or in Germany for Mr. Schröder or in Austria, that's not illegal.
The biggest takedown of democracy is being done legally. That's the scary part of it, because everything they're doing is legal.
It's worse because there's also a serious attempt to stifle any kind of discussion of this already. Currently we have the case of Catherine Belton and her book, Putin's People, which she's being sued in the UK for this book. I know in the case of The Economist, they actually talked about, they had mentioned a corruption or a bribery on the part of one Russian oligarch who then sued them. And The Economist would have gone out of business until they finally found this, paper evidence that he had been bribing people, at which the suit disappeared. It just went away.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So this is what we're up against. And one of the things that we need to do actually is to pass what in the US has only been moving in the last 2-3 years with scurrilous libel suits is SLAPP laws, SLAPP, which actually defends journalists against these kinds of attacks. But in the UK, basically if you talk about these issues, you will face a lawsuit from people with endless amounts of money.
Yeah.
And if you're a journalist,
the problem is, because before any operation that, the Kremlin decides to act on, they flood social media. They have hands down won the disinformation war. So they flood social media with the talking points and with several versions. They throw everything out to see what sticks. So then you do have people who are like, oh, I didn't know Ukraine and Russia are two different countries, because this is what they're seeing on Facebook, on Twitter, on, articles by journalists, being pushed. And that's a big problem, because then Russia is, excellent at pushing disinformation nonstop, 24/7 on any topic. And they have literally a troll army, behind them who can reach billions of people at a given point,
Yeah. Olga,
and basically you have exactly the same narrative when it comes to Syria, for instance, and Russia.
Absolutely.
Which is also that those people will be never mature enough to be free.
Yes,
you have this idea, and you had also this kind of idea invading the public spheres when the Arab Springs occur, when the revolution in Hong Kong started with the revolution of the umbrella, etc. Saying, well, basically also Hong Kong, China, there is no difference. And those people, they are Muslims, they are Arabs. Basically, well, the question of the freedom for them doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So you have these kind of things, and just I think that in my view, if you ask, most of the senior civil servants and the government officials, in most of the European countries, with the exception, of course, of the Baltic states, Poland, etc., they have these ideas in mind.
Yeah. Toomas, speaking of Lithuania, we see in recent weeks reports that Lukashenko is flooding, sending migrants abroad and into Lithuanian, across Lithuanian borders and making money off of it. And right now we even saw temporarily, supposedly, Iraqi Airways was supposed to stop the flights, but now I'm not sure what's happening with that.
Yeah, that's not clear yet, but
yeah. But what so he's trying. We know he's doing this to destabilize Lithuania, but doesn't this become a bigger issue for Europe? And if so, do you see Europe responding? Anytime.
Well, there's been some response. We were a little tougher. We sent 100 kilometers of barbed wire to help them do. But other countries are sending blankets and tents to these people who are not refugees. They are arriving with lots of cash. First of all, they're paying lots of cash to get to Europe. Then they arrive with lots of cash. The latest, they're basically coming in there with the newest iPhone. I don't even have that iPhone. They're wealthy Iraqis by and large, and also some people from Mali. Mm-hmm. But they're wealthy people who are, Lukashenko is cashing in and causing a problem for Lithuania, primarily because Lithuania has been the most vocal about Belarus and the repressions in Belarus, as well as hosting President Tsikhanovskaya in Vilnius. And so this is his payback.
Okay.
And you see the Belarusian, military or whatever, in any case, military vehicles leading and bringing people to the border. So, they're completely complicit in this.
Yeah, absolutely. No, this is an orchestrated thing by Belarus, and they're making money off of this on top of it.
And so far, what we've seen at the EU level is the usual deep concern. Well, I'm surprised, actually, Lithuania has not invoked Article 4 of the, they were talking about Article 5, but Article 4 is of the North Atlantic Treaty, which actually allows allies to call for political consultations on something that affects the independence and sovereignty of the country and political independence of the country. And I figure it's just a matter of time, but Brussels, be it NATO or the EU, is kind of asleep at this time.
Yeah.
That's exactly the big worry right now in Ukraine, because we can wake up any morning with, Russian tanks further invading Ukraine, and what will happen? What will happen? Who will do anything?
Well, they did use the spring crisis to actually put massive amounts of material all around in the north, and then in the east, and in Crimea. And even though they pulled out some of the troops, they left the material there.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It won't take much.
No, absolutely. First of all, there are more troops on Ukraine's border than at any time before, during invasion, or after invasion.
No, but basically Putin is testing the resolve of the allies since the beginning. And I think he was absolutely right to do so, because there was absolutely no reactions. And I think the real issue is that we could not expect right now any reaction. And so probably it will continue and so forth until what?
Yeah, my question is, where is it going to, what is going to stop it?
The fight against corruption. The fact that if we attack, I think that's probably just a minimal solution, but still needed. That if we attack, Russian Putin's inner circles, and just, for instance, the list that was released by Vladimir Ashurkov, the head of Navalny anti-corruption foundations, we sanction those people very gravely. We prevent them to come to Europe or to the US or Canada, etc., etc., with their families to send
And their
kids to
families.
all schools.
That's right.
Absolutely. And we seize and freeze their assets abroad. I mean, real estate, banking accounts, and this kind of thing. This could have reactions. Could have, I think, not will
But you need
have.
political will. You need political will.
We need absolutely. We need that.
I'll give you an example. I mean, when it came to sanctioning Lukashenko for what he's been doing, a lot of countries had their objections. So, where does the entire Belarusian economy lives on loans from Raiffeisen Bank, which is an Austrian bank. And what did the Austrian government do? Say, no, we will not prevent. I mean, they excluded Raiffeisen Bank from those sanctions. I mean, you can find cases in almost every country where there's one or another says, no, you can do whatever you want, but this is our economic interest. So you end up with rather weak sanctions. If you see the attack on freedom of speech with Deripaska and Oven in the UK right now, I don't see why those people are allowed to come. But the daughter of Peskov, was just married in Sardinia. In Italy, right?
Well, I'm not surprised.
Rented every room.
I'm not surprised about
They took every hotel, every room.
All about, because we see all over Europe, the United States, COVID doesn't exist, right? We've got the big lie going on in the United States, correct? The GOP is unrecognizable. In the UK, you have a liar that basically, is prime minister. They're going to shut me down. Anyway, Russia is constantly rewriting the history.
And everyone else's country's history.
Yeah, not only
just
Russia's
their own
history, but let's rewrite somebody else's history. It's sort of, there's this warping of our shared truth, or rather, it's a complete, what would be the correct word?
An attack on truth. Right now, something that is true.
Attack on truth. Is this not the most dangerous thing, let's say, for societies in general, where you don't have one shared truth?
Yes, that's something that I must say that already exists since a long time. But it's true that you have those tendencies within many societies. You have that in the US. You have that in most of the EU countries. People do not trust anything. They are fueling the narratives. It was not created by Russia, but if you see not only their propaganda channels, but also all the sub-products, if I may say so, that exist. Yes. YouTube channel, Instagram,
social media,
Telegram channels, WhatsApp channel, VKontact channels, and in which you have many anti-vax also coming from France, etc. You see how they are inflating this kind of propaganda just to create and to plant the seed of the discord.
Nicolas, I've been Monique and I have been busy with this podcast, so I normally, follow news, but I haven't been really, really following it. But I still check Russian news every single day, several outlets to see what's happening. If I just read their news, I would think there's a civil war in France. That's what they talk about. Civil war. Well, and my friend lives in France. I'm like, what is going on? And he's like, nothing. I'm like, oh, okay. Just a small pocket of people who, are pushing this narrative inside of France. If you read Russian media, France is in the middle of a civil war right now.
Which is obviously not true, because the majority of people, is supporting, the French government when it comes to, the sanitary measures that basically
of course, for COVID.
Absolutely.
But if I may just add some points, I think that one of the main things for the EU government is also to speak more, not about that, the sanitary measures, but to speak more about what Russia, or by part also China, are doing, I think.
Yeah, shining the light on everything and making everything transparent.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's true. But I think many governments, I mean, again, I look at the German government, I look at the Austrian government, no one's willing to do that. I mean, it's, you lose your supporters, you lose your financial backers.
Yeah, financial
if you criticize, VW, Volkswagen is like very heavily into China. German Mittelstand or medium-sized enterprises that produce all kinds of machinery, everything from oil rigs and oil extraction for Russia to everything else that they send to China. I mean, they're economically beholden. I mean, it's the export they're both large export markets.
And it's important, and it shouldn't be honestly that difficult. Like if Lukashenko, hijacks a plane out of the sky to arrest a journalist, like, every Western government who, pushes values needs to come out and not only say they're deeply concerned, but show they're deeply concerned by actually instituting some kind of, consequences. Russia commits atrocities. They poison Navalny. I mean, on one hand, even going back to Germany, you had, Merkel, who was so vocal on, look what happened to Navalny because he was being treated there, flown to Germany. And then on the other hand, doing the Nord Stream. Yeah. Exactly. So, where is Navalny? Do you even remember who he is anymore? And that's the message that it sends to Russia. So, okay, you could poison and try to murder your opposition, but as long as we get a pipeline, we're all good. Everyone's fine.
Yeah. It's almost like they cancel each other out, right? The actions of, let's say, doing all sorts of investigations into Navalny and saving him, so on and so forth, is completely canceled out by going through with Nord Stream. That's the impression I'm getting.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so to wrap it up, in the next few episodes, we are going to be doing a very, very deep dive into the far right and the rise of the far right in Europe and United States. And we actually want both of you to comment on this. Orban, is acting. I personally think he is an authoritarian who is right in the heart of, a democratic Europe. And not only that, he's also continues to serve Putin's interest. How should EU be dealing with him? And also, like recently, we know like Steve Bannon, who was Trump's campaign manager, is heavily involved in working with far-right groups across Europe and United States, and was an advisor to Orban. And now we have Tucker Carlson from Fox News, who suddenly made, a surprise appearance with Orban recently, and now is, thanks to Orban, will be speaking at a far-right conference that is backed by him.
Well, these things are also, just to keep Russia in the fact, is Konstantin Malofeyev, who's the billionaire who has, he's very rich, and he's paid for mercenaries in Ukraine, but also he's also a hardcore sort of Orthodox Christian and is funding all kinds of religious fundamentalists across Europe that generally take a very far right view on gays, on the issues like that. So, it all kind of comes together into this hard right international that it has Putin, it has Malofeyev, it has Yakunin, and then you have Marine Le Pen, 9 million euros from Russia, right? You have Salvini in Italy, money,
I know.
So these people.
And Meloni right now, which is probably even worse.
Well, but then you have these lesser known hard right parties in virtually every country in Europe today. And they are well funded, and they're certainly not getting their funding just domestically, since They don't have that level of support.
No, they don't
yet.
have
They
that.
have,
Exactly.
but they are doing rather well financially.
Yeah,
absolutely. I agree. I agree absolutely with Toomas on that, and I think that's a source of concern, basically, and because I think all those people are very dangerous. They are fueling also narrative that become not dominant. I mean, in those countries, but still part of the common mindset, even for Marine Le Pen. Even if very fortunately she had very bad results, in the last regional elections in France, still you have 20% of the people who are supporting her. But I think also there is also something that we have to be worried about, which is the fact that many people in the press outside Europe are pointing out the complicity which is real between the far right and Mr. Putin. But you have also the complicity between the radical left and Mr. Putin.
Yes.
You were
Absolutely.
mentioning
Yes.
the Die Linke in Germany. We have also Les Insoumis in France, and we have also part of the Corbynists, the former Corbynists, in the UK, and other party. And you have mainstream leaders. You have mainstream leaders, at the CDU, in the Les Républicains in France, in some other conservative party, in maybe in Italy, but also, in Sweden, etc. And you have the socialists. Part of the socialists in France, I must say, like the Greens in Germany, and also the Greens in France, are very deeply against Putin's regime, Xi Jinping's regime, and all the authoritarian or dictatorial states, basically, which is good. But you still have a minority, in the Socialist Party who are in favor of, let's say, an appeasement with Putin. And you had the former Socialist MP in France who was visiting Assad with the people of the far right. So you think, let's not focus only on the far right. Because
we'll get into that as well.
They are less visible. But the people of the mainstream party are, up to a certain point, even more dangerous because people do not pay attention to them.
Remember, Olga, when we spoke with Heather Connolly, all about the political capture, because this is what we're talking about, right? Political capture. And Nicolas, when are the elections coming up? Because you're going to be coming back and you're going to be commenting a bit of what is going on there with the elections. And also we have some other questions for you for what is happening in France.
April 2022.
Oh, well,
okay.
There we go.
The presidential election, and then approximately 6 weeks after we have the parliamentary election.
Okay, great. So you're going to be back. Okay.
Well, we have Putin's sham election coming up to look forward to.
Yeah, we're also going to be commenting on that. Toomas, we're going to be asking you to come back because we would like to know a little bit about the future of warfare, which we believe we haven't been able to touch today. I think it's
and artificial.
We can't do that today, but we would like you to come back when we talk about NATO and when we talk about the future of warfare, AI, and also weapons. So we want to thank you both for coming. What an invigorating discussion that we've had. So we'd like to thank you both.
Yeah, thank you so much both for coming on. And
well, it's been great.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Hey, everybody, if you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to subscribe and please visit our website, KremlinFile.com. This is Season 1, Kremlin File, hosted by Olga Lautman and me, Monique Camara. This is a Bunker Crew Media production with executive producers Marley Clements, Jack Bryan, Grant DeSimone, Ben, Brett, and Jordy Mycelis of Midas Media, with associate producers Ruby Frankel and Sarah Metz. Theme music by Oreste Camarra. Sound editing and mixing by Joy Ellett. Subscribe to Kremlin File wherever you listen to podcasts.
It's recording.
Oh, it is recording.
For like 5 minutes.